So welcome again. As mentioned, we are here today to go through a session focused on PPVC materials and how they're linked to independent smallholder volumes. We are going to start by looking at the interlinkages between the PPVC work and the IRF. Then we're going to dive into these resources, which are going to be the minimal smallholder deforestation layer, the landscape deforestation criteria, the dealer's guidance, and then we're going to wrap up with an overview of the resources, where to find them, and a Q&A. So here you have our timings. We have about 15 minutes for the Q&A at the end, but we will probably have a little bit more. First, as a little bit of context, just note, as you may be already aware, the new version of the IRF, the IRF version 6.0, has a breakdown of the IRF profile into the different FFB sourcing areas. That is the directly managed areas, volumes coming from independent plantations, and volumes coming from independent smallholders. So today we're going to talk about these volumes linked to independent smallholders. And the reason that we are going to talk about them is that another new criteria of the version 6.0 of the IRF is traceability. We understand that traceability for smallholders is challenging, given complexities and also capacity limitations on the supply chain. And because of this, the IRF version 6.0 tries to address these challenges by allowing alternative pathways into traceability to support smallholder volumes to move into the upper categories, meaning progressing and delivering. So for independent smallholders, traceability to production area is also allowed, not only traceability to plot, which is what is allowed for the directly managed areas and independent plantations. So what that means is that for independent smallholders, there's a series of administrative units. It will depend on the country. And by having this traceability to these areas, the IRF will acknowledge these efforts and allocate the volumes accordingly. So now in the IRF, in the version 6.0, we have questions regarding these alternative pathways. So we have questions regarding the minimum smallholder deforestation layer. We have questions regarding volumes linked to landscapes. And we have questions regarding volumes linked to dealer engagement programs. And to support all of this, the PPVC has been working very hard into these three resources that we are going to present today. So these resources are the MSD layer, the criteria for de-risk mitigation for landscapes, and the dealer engagement guidance. Before we go into these resources in detail, just as a summary of what are the options for independent smallholder volumes to reach progressing and delivering, we have this little graph. So initially, the dichotomy starts on whether you will have traceability to plot or if you only have traceability to production area. If you were to have traceability to plot and you meet other relevant allocation criteria towards delivering, namely the remote assessment, field assessment, then those volumes will enter into delivery. If you don't have that granular traceability and then you have to go into the route of traceability to production area, or TTPA, then firstly, you will have to check whether you have enough visibility on the volumes coming from a village. If you have that, you could use the MSD layer to check whether your volumes come from a minimal smallholder deforestation area. And if they do, then those volumes will go into delivery. If you don't have that visibility, you could go into whether your volumes are linked to a landscape program. If they are linked to a landscape, then you will have to check whether this landscape meets the de-risk mitigation criteria, and if so, you will go into delivery. And finally, but not least, if you don't have the MSD or the landscape, you could go into a dealer engagement program, and that would lead your volumes into Progressing. If you don't have a dealer engagement program, then your volumes would be categorized just based on the answers to the other questions on the template. So yeah, this is a little snapshot of the options for independent smallholders. But as I mentioned today, we're going to we will be focusing on 3, 4, and 5. And now I'll hand over to my colleague Nikita, and she will walk us through the minimal smallholder deforestation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sol. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikita, and I'm the technical coordinator for the PPBC subgroup. And today I'll be walking you through the minimal smallholder deforestation layer with a little bit of introduction, and then also going into the resources and how to answer the IRF questions. Sol, can you go to the next slide, please? So why did we develop the independent smallholder layer for Indonesia and Malaysia? Firstly, as Sol was explaining in the beginning, traceability for independent smallholders is quite challenging. And Malaysia and Indonesia have 3 million independent smallholders with significant challenges related to mapping, registering, and traceability for farm level or plot level. Since the POCG has recognized the importance of the just transition towards deforestation-free for palm-independent smallholders, the PPBC has done this analysis to identify areas that have minimal independent smallholder-driven deforestation, or MSD, since the industry cutoff date of 2015. At the moment, the analysis is available from 2016 to 2024. We will also be doing the analysis for 2025 deforestation, and the timelines for that will be in early to mid 2026. And the threshold for identifying the areas of MSD or minimal smallholder deforestation versus non-MSD is administrative areas in Indonesia or Malaysia that have over 95% of total deforestation are classified as non-minimal smallholder deforestation, versus the ones that have less than 5% are classified as minimal smallholder deforestation. So can you go to the next slide, please? The layer will be used for 2 purposes. For the purposes of the IRF 6.0 reporting, it allows companies to consider the volumes that are coming from MSD areas to be classified as delivering in the IRF 6.0. And then the secondary purpose for doing this analysis is also to prioritize what to do in the areas that are classified as non-MSD. And in those areas, we'll go further after the introduction to MSD. We'll talk about what other risk mitigation measures can be done in the non-MSD areas. Next slide, please. So as I said, this is just a simplified graph of what I was explaining earlier. So the areas classified as MSD will go into delivering, and the areas classified as non-MSD will need other risk mitigation measures that Sol had explained earlier in the IRF volumes mapping, so landscape and dealers. Next slide. Okay, so in the IRF, we have two questions that are related to the minimal smallholder deforestation layer. We have question 18, which is the mill's independent smallholder volume traceable to areas with minimal risk of deforestation? To answer this question, we have an Excel sheet, which is available on the website. We'll walk through the resource later, but that Excel sheet provides a list of villages that are classified as minimal deforestation and a list of villages that are classified as non-minimal deforestation. So you can use that Excel sheet to answer yes or no to question 18. Moving on to question 19, we have indicate the percentage of the mill's independent smallholder volumes traceable to areas with minimal risk of deforestation. Here, an external calculation will be required, and you would have to enter the percentage of the mill's independent smallholder volumes that are traceable to the areas with MSD using the Excel sheet provided. And those, if your questions are answered and you have the volumes that you have answered yes to the questions, the volumes will move into the delivering category. Next slide, please. So just where can you find the resources? On the Palm Oil Collaboration Group website, we have a page that's under the tab Minimal Smallholder Deforestation, where we have an introduction of why the MSD analysis was done. We have the process for identifying threshold, as well as the public methodology listed in this website. And then we also have the MSD Excel results, which does the classification into MSD and non-MSD villages for Indonesia and Malaysia. The Excel sheet and the methodology can also be found on the NDPE IRF website under the Technical Documents tab. In case you require the GIS shapefiles for the MSD to do the MSD results, you can get in touch with the IRF email address, so ndpeirf@proforest.net, and CC me to request the GIS shapefiles for the layer. The Excel sheet at the moment should be enough to support your classification of volumes, but in case you require the shapefiles, please feel free to reach out, as these are too heavy to upload onto the website. So that's why we need you to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to share the shapefiles with you. Next slide, please, Sol. So this is just a snapshot of what the website looks like. So as I said, there are two ways to access these resources. So you can visit the Palm Oil Collaboration Group Minimal Smallholder Deforestation tab, where you have the introduction of what is the MSD and the purpose of the MSD, as well as the methodology and the detailed Excel sheet. You can download the detailed Excel sheet on the website, and then we'll also share it as a resource. Thanks, Jake, for adding the link. Yeah, but we can also share it after this call, and it will be part of this, the resources, including the slide deck. As you can see, I've added a snapshot of the Excel sheet. So the tabs currently have an introduction README sheet, which will help you, like, just gives a bit of introduction to what the sheet is about. And then we have the results for Indonesia, Peninsular Malaysia, and Sabah and Sarawak. Next slide, please. So here's what the Indonesia Excel sheet looks like. As you can see, we have a list of the villages, a list of the sub-districts, and a list of the districts and province and region. These are available for the three, so Indonesia, Peninsular Malaysia, and Sabah Sarawak. And the Excel sheet currently has the old analysis of the MSD, which is the analysis that was done from 2016 to 2022. And then it also has the new analysis, which is up to 2024. So for the purpose of your IRF reporting, you would have to use the new analysis. We've included the old one just to be transparent on the changes that were there from between 2022 and 2024, and the external validation period as well that happened between then. So for your IRF reporting, you can look at this final column, which has the MSD results for 2016 to 2024, which does the classification of MSD versus non-MSD. And for more detailed information on the deforestation hectareage for those villages, that information is also available in case you are interested. Next slide, please. So in case you require the GIS shapefiles, which, as I said, we'll be happy to share with you, this is a snapshot of how the maps look for Indonesia using the 5% threshold. As you can see, in Sumatra, we have 83% of villages classifying as IRF delivering for the independent smallholder volumes. So that is all of the villages that are, all of the spots in the map that are blue are the MSD villages, and all of the ones that are in gray are non-MSD. So in Riau as well, you can see 70% of the villages are delivering. And in Kalimantan, it would be approximately 82% of villages as delivering. Next slide, please. Similarly, we've included a snapshot for what the Malaysia results would look like. And again, the gray villages are non-MSD and the blue villages are MSD. So in Peninsular Malaysia, approximately 90% or 89.7% of the Mukims in Peninsular Malaysia can be classified as IRF delivering, and 40% of the districts in Sabah Sarawak would be IRF delivering. In case you have any questions regarding the MSD questions or resources, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we can revisit your questions at the end of the session, as Sol said, and then we can have a bit more discussion on in case anything is unclear for that. But for now, I will move on to the deforestation risk mitigation pathway, which is the second set of questions under the IRF related to independent smallholder volumes. Here we have a bit more information for landscape initiatives. Sol, can you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. So for the volumes that are coming from the areas that are classified as non-MSD, so this is, again, just a snapshot of the volumes mapping that Sol had presented earlier. So first you go to MSD or non-MSD. If your volumes are falling under the MSD, then they are already falling under delivering. But if the volumes come from a non-MSD area, there are some further risk mitigation measures that can be taken. And essentially, these can be done through landscape initiatives or smallholder initiatives. So essentially, for the volumes that are coming from non-MSD areas and they are considered as not delivering, you can ask the question of, are the volumes coming from a landscape or smallholder initiative? If yes, then we have another question on do those volumes meet all of the deforestation risk mitigation criteria? If you answer yes to that question, the volumes go back to delivering. If you answer no, the volumes go to progressing. I will give a bit more context about these criteria as well in the next slide. But essentially, just to introduce what is this deforestation risk mitigation criteria and the deforestation risk mitigation approach. Essentially, the PPBC subgroup had developed this approach to recognize the volumes that are coming from landscape initiatives or smallholder programs to be considered as delivering. Next slide, please. The purpose of doing this approach is to capture what are the main activities that are needed to address and to reduce the risk of deforestation from independent smallholders. The criteria can be used for reporting on independent smallholders in two ways, so landscape initiatives and smallholder programs. At the moment, the criteria for the landscape initiatives is almost completed, and there are links available to that in the public website as well. We'll go through the resources later. And for smallholder programs, they're still under development and in a pilot phase. I can go into the timelines for when that will be ready as well later. And just to say, as I mentioned, sorry, so yeah, just to say that the volumes for landscape initiatives meeting all the deforestation risk mitigation criteria would go under delivering, and the rest fall back into the progressing category. Yeah, next slide. So what is the scope of these deforestation risk mitigation criteria? In a nutshell, they cover action plans and commitment from smallholders and wider stakeholders. They cover deforestation monitoring and response, and they cover a trend of deforestation reporting. So essentially, has deforestation been on a downward trend since the start of the initiative? These criteria are also meant to be a continuous improvement and not a yes, no, or pass, fail criteria. That's why the criteria allows for more of phased reporting as well, since landscape initiatives are more of long-term programs. So when can you use the landscape criteria? And what would be the eligibility criteria for a landscape initiative? At the moment, the eligibility criteria is requiring a few things that would make it an eligible landscape initiative. Firstly, we are asking for there to be some amount of multi-stakeholder collaboration. We are requiring some amount of clear boundaries defined and linked to jurisdictions. And we require that the landscape initiative has defined sustainability goals and outcomes at the level of the landscape, and as well as some amount of monitoring and progress, monitoring of progress towards the shared goals and outcomes. And here, just a timeline of the landscape resources. As I mentioned, at the moment, the landscape criteria in its current form can be found under the Palm Oil Collaboration Group website in the PPBC webpage. And Jake can also put a link in this chat. If you can put a link in this chat, Jake, that would be great. But we can also share it later. It includes the detailed criteria and then also some FAQ questions in case any companies have come across, have any difficulties with the criteria. And then going into the timeline for the landscape criteria, From August to November, we are currently testing and feeding feedback, going through a feedback period of the criteria with landscape implementers. We have a survey available for the implementers to provide their feedback on the POCG website. Once we have managed to collect all of the feedback, we'll go through an integration period towards the end of the year, so more in November and December of this year. And then once we've managed to integrate all of the feedback, we will provide an external supporting Excel tool to help reporting on the criteria for landscape initiatives, as well as an Excel for the calculation of volumes, which will also be provided. And then just to say that in Q1 of 2026, the landscape criteria will be ready for IRF reporting. So now moving a bit more into the link of the landscape criteria and the IRF. Why is this pathway useful? Since many landscape initiatives and smallholder programs are already established and are already supporting smallholders, in the past, they have not been recognized by volume-based tools like the IRF. Therefore, we've given we are trialing out this method to report on the volumes, independent smallholder volumes that are coming from landscape initiatives, to be able to recognize the efforts that landscape initiatives and smallholder programs are doing. This also helps companies to improve their IRF scores for independent smallholder volumes and provide more transparency on the post-2025 reporting. And finally, it also supports smallholder inclusion on the pathway towards DCF or deforestation conversion free. Next slide, please, Sol. So we have 3 questions for under the IRF for landscape or independent smallholder programs. Question 20 is that you need to indicate the percentage of the mill's independent smallholder volumes linked to a landscape initiative or a smallholder program. As I mentioned before, at the moment, the resources are ready for landscape initiatives only, and we can talk about the smallholder program later. So for now, we are only referring to the landscape initiative bit of this question. Here, you would have to enter the percentage of the mill's independent smallholder volumes linked to a landscape initiative. And some examples of this would be the training program for sustainable production and with smallholder producers, and understanding if the initiative covers the minimum criteria, which we can go into the next slide, of a landscape initiative. An example calculation for this would be if, for example, 600 independent smallholders are linked to a sub-district where there is an active active landscape initiative, which this represents 25% of the mill's total independent smallholder volume. And an additional 200 independent smallholders are part of a smallholder program, which represents 5% of the mill's total independent smallholder volumes. So to be able to answer question 20, you would then add the 5% and the 25%, which is 30%, and you would fill in 30% of volume, independent smallholder volumes under question 20. Next slide. Question 21 is about if the landscape initiative meets all of the deforestation risk mitigation criteria that a recognized initiative should have as defined in the PPBC independent smallholder deforestation free approach. Sorry, it's really a mouthful to read all these words. Essentially, you would answer yes if the landscape initiative meets the deforestation risk mitigation criteria. As I mentioned before, the scope of the criteria are having action plans, commitment from smallholders, having a deforestation monitoring response system in place, and having some amount of deforestation trend reporting. And you can access in the screenshot in the right is how the landscape, the criteria looks at the moment, which you can access on the PPBC website to get familiar with the criteria as well if you are interested. Essentially, if you're answering yes to question 21, then the volumes would go into the delivering category of the IRF. The next question is about those volumes that you've answered yes for in question 21, for which you'll need an external calculation, essentially to answer the percentage of the mill's independent smallholder volumes covered by a landscape initiative or smallholder program that meet the deforestation risk mitigation criteria. Next slide, please. So here is a bit more expanded snapshot of the criteria that I had explained before. We won't go into the details of this at the moment, but we have done a socialization with landscape implementers on the criteria as well, which is why we're collecting feedback on the feasibility of reporting on the criteria from the landscape implementers. But essentially, the criteria is divided into criteria A and criteria B. And there are a set of 6 criteria in total. Criteria A is more about having a commitment and action plan, having a landscape or jurisdictional level monitoring and response system, and having a long-term plan to develop incentives at the landscape level. And as I had mentioned before as well, the criteria is more about reporting on progress and not just yes or no. So you would essentially have to identify, the landscape initiative would have to identify which year it would fall under and then meet the requirements of that year as set out in the criteria. There's more detailed guidance available as well to support the landscape initiatives reporting on this. Next slide, please. So here is a snapshot of the criteria for B, which is more about deforestation monitoring and response. Essentially here, the main thing that we are asking for is there a baseline and a target date set for reaching minimal deforestation? And is the deforestation on a decreasing trend compared to that baseline? As you can see on the right, you can answer whether the criteria is fully met, started or in progress, or not started or not met. And then based on your answers for the year and the criteria, the landscape initiative would then fall under the delivering or the progressing category. Next slide, please. So that was about the landscape criteria. The questions also have another part on smallholder programs. So we just wanted to clarify that at the moment, the criteria are almost ready for landscape initiatives. For smallholder programs, we are still undergoing pilots with 2 POCG companies, which started in June. And we are in the final phases of those POCG companies testing out the criteria in 2 of their smallholder programs. Once that is ready, we'll share more about it during the POCG in-person meetings in November. And then we can share a bit more on the progress and the next steps as well during the in-person meeting in November. And the criteria, based on the feedback received from the POCG companies in November as well, we'll integrate the results of the pilot and the feedback, and the criteria should be ready for reporting by around end of Q1 or early Q2 2026. I will stop here for the landscape and smallholder program as well. But yeah, in case any questions come up, please do add them in the chat. And then now I will pass to Lisa, who will go through explanation for the dealer's guidance.
Thank you, Nikita. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa. I'm based in the Southeast Asia office. So I'll be running through briefly the dealer's guidance for independent smallholder volumes. All right, next slide. So what is this guidance for? So this guidance was actually developed by the PPPC working group. And I also like to thank some of the companies that supported the pilot phase to consolidate some of the feedbacks that we have integrated into the guidance. So echoing what Sol said earlier, so IR version 6 actually acknowledges the challenges with achieving full traceability, TTP. So we've come up with an alternative pathway, which is TTPA. So under TTPA, there are a few options you can take to move your volumes into progressing or delivering. So under TTPA pathway, only for independent smallholders. So you have minimal smallholder deforestation, landscape initiative or independent smallholder programs, and also FFB intermediary engagement, or also known as dealer engagements. Some of these questions may also require you to fill in a number or percent into the template. And this has to be conducted manually outside the template. So if we move on to the next slide. So these are the questions under the independent smallholder TTP pathway, question 19, 20, 22, and 23. So all of these questions will require a manual form of calculation, which the dealer guidance for independent smallholder volumes shows you how to do it. Moving on to the next slide. So this guidance covers basically the minimum control mechanisms and traceability requirements for a FFB intermediary to separate independent smallholder volumes with other types of FFB producers. So in essence, your dealer or intermediary, your co-op, your again, they need to be able to differentiate independent smallholder volumes away from independent plantation volumes. Secondly, data collection processes and analysis for volume categorization. So the guidance also shows you how do you bucket accordingly into the different pathways that your independent smallholder volumes are parked in. And finally, the guidance also highlights what are the minimum requirements to qualify as an intermediary FFB intermediary engagement, or also known as a dealer engagement. All right, moving forward to the next slide. So just to highlight a little bit about the minimal control mechanisms, or also known as the basic traceability requirements. So echoing again, basically your intermediary will need to be able to differentiate the FFB volumes from the various types of producers, whether it's from directly managed areas or independent plantations away from independent smallholders, because this pathway is only valid for independent smallholder volumes. Secondly, your intermediaries will need to identify the independent smallholder volumes linked to the applicable administrative unit. So for Indonesia, for example, it is on village level. For Peninsula, it's on the sub-district. For Sabah Sarawak, it's on the district level. And what is required, the traceability reports documents at minimum should also document information regarding the independent smallholder volumes accordingly. So for your dealer or ramp level, at least the GPS coordinate or address. And for independent smallholder volumes, we're looking at total volumes for each supplier, for each supplying a sub-district or district or village level. So according to which areas you're sourcing from, right? Secondly, estimated number of smallholders per sub-administrative unit. And C and D are optional. These are to actually help you to validate whether the information provided is actually accurate. So you can look at threshold requirements, right? Hectareage against volume, whether the GPS coordinates are accurate according to the national platforms and systems. So you can do those kind of cross checks. Okay. Moving on to the next slide. Also, just a reminder, so these pathways are also just for independent smallholder volumes, but the mill must also have a prerequisite. So if you recall, in the earlier parts of the IR version 6 templates, there are the mill systems and processes. So the mill must, of course, have the NDP action commitment. It must have communicated with its staff. It must have an NDP action plan, right? And then also the mill must have a comprehensive grievance management, and also no independent smallholder log grievances, or if there is, they are under resolution. So these are the prerequisites before you even answer those to move into delivery. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So I'll just cover the question on dealer engagement because Nikita has already covered for landscapes and MSD. So there is a question to tie in your independent smallholder volumes to dealer engagement. So I'm just showing you here that external calculation required. And of course, if you download the dealer guidance, it will show you the step-by-step, the most manual way, the most basic way for you to calculate. But here I'll just summarize it. So for example, if 6 out of 10 dealers of Mill A has been part of a dealer engagement program, so you want to look at how much 6 out of the 10 independent smallholder volumes are parked under the 6 dealers. So for example, here, if the 6 dealers represent a total of 20% of all independent smallholder volumes from Mill A, okay, so overall, then you park that 20% into that question. So if you meet this, that 20% adds into your progressing volumes. Moving on to the next slide. And I'll also highlight, so what is a minimum requirement? So we cannot just say anything that is a dealer engagement. So there are minimum requirements. So 2 items, very basic. You must have at least engaged the intermediary on NDPE or traceability. So I think the second one is mostly a free pass for most of you because you are already actively engaging your supply chain to get traceability. And some of the examples of engagements or equivalent could be programs, training session, workshops, or at the end of the year when they have their annual general meetings, and this could be conducted either internally or externally. And we've put a threshold here of within the last 3 years of IRF reporting. And we are including simple evidence, for example, like annual reports, meeting minutes, or photos of someone presenting and showing NDPE. So something that's easy to qualify. And of course, this engagement should be an active and long-term process. And there should be also evidence of the TTPA percentage increasing year on year, right? To show that the program is effective. All right, moving on to the next slide. And this is also to show you where you can download the dealer guidance for independent smallholder volume. So if you go to the IRF website, under resources, you go to technical documents and you can find this and you can download it there. Also, we just want to note that we also still remain to open receiving feedback on this document throughout the current year to also support the refinement of the next update cycle. So this is a living document. So we appreciate all the feedbacks from companies. If you have feedback on how to improve the data collection, on how to analyze, that's very we will really appreciate that. Yeah. And of course, all this will be consolidated in the subsequent year and reviewed, and then they will have and then after that we can release the next document. Yeah. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah, I think I'll pass it back to Sol to go through the resources.
Yes, thank you so much, Nikita and Lisa, for your presentations. It was very clear. And yeah, before we move into the questions that we see that you already put into the chat, just a quick reminder that on top of these resources that Nikita and Lisa just presented, we have more general ones. You will be able to find all of this into in the IRF website. So you have here a link or a QR code to get there. We also have more general walkthrough videos that our colleague Jake recorded. So it's more about how to use the template, and yeah, so walk through the template. And yeah, finally, we're always available at the IRF help desk. That is our email address, ndpe-irf@proforest.net. And we will do our best to answer you as fast as possible. But yeah, you can send any question there, any feedback that you have. Yeah, all of those queries, we will be there to answer them. So now we can start with the questions. I'll stop the recording first.